I am happy to present Michael Viljak, our Manager of Consultant Development, and he'll be sharing his ideas on client management. So take it away, Michael.
Thank you very much, Ashley, and thank you all for joining us today. And we are going to be talking about client management. So, very important topic. I would categorize this presentation as kind of a holistic approach on client management. Holistic being an amalgam of psychology with the client and actual practice items. I've been in the pension business for over 30 years and been with RPAG since its inception. So a lot of this is stuff that I've learned along the way, and you know, some of it is mistakes I made, and that's sometimes the best way to learn. So we are going to look at an overview of goals for client management. And these are very basic. We'll get into more layers here, but know your client. Very important to know your client, but also very important to know your client's people, those on the committee and some that might not be on the committee. We'll talk about that in a minute. Make certain your client knows you and RPAG and all the services that you can provide through the network. It's very, very important to set proper expectations, and we're going to talk about that for a few minutes as well. Also, very important slogan that we use often is attempt to blow the socks off your clients. So not just do a good job, but do a great job. Make yourself indispensable to your client and their people. And that's kind of a psychology approach to management. And it makes a lot of sense. I think you'll agree as we walk through this, but that's the goal, to make ourselves indispensable. We don't want the client to think that we are dispensable and that they should be looking at other opportunities as well. It's fine if they do from time to time, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but we want to be indispensable to the client and the client's people. Okay. Really, who is the client? It's important to know your client's business. Most of them, the vast majority, are very proud of their business, and they like to talk about it. And that we should open up that opportunity and let them tell us about their business and get to know them a little bit better. And that helps us with our relationship with them as well. I always like to ask for a tour of their facility or a new location they may have opened up. And that, again, gives us an opportunity to get a more personal relationship going with whoever is showing us around. Use their products and or services and let them know about it. I think that's really important, too, depending on what business they're in. If you can tell them, you know, I tried this product of yours and I was very happy. I think, you know, we'll be using this product going forward, and we'll be telling our friends about it as well. I mean, nothing more fun to hear. I mean, if someone said that about you and your company, you'd be very happy. You'd have a big smile on your face. And we like to see big smiles on our clients' faces. Know why your client hired RPAG. Very important item. Sometimes we jump into a new plan. We just got hired and we're ready to show them all the wonderful things we do. It's kind of important to know why we were hired. So I like to ask that question at the onset of a relationship. What was it that separated us from the competition? And it's important to respond to that as well. They may say, well, your depth of analysis of investments was helpful, or your fiduciary fitness program. And then we should identify that and we should highlight that in our practice as well. What does your client need? What does your client want? Those are two very different questions, right? They're different questions put to me personally. What do I need and what do I want, right? I need shelter and food, but I want a little bit more than that too. So that can open up an interesting dialogue with your client as well. And of course, some of these are one-on-one issues you wouldn't want to bring up necessarily in the midst of a committee meeting, but as you're getting to know your client, they can be helpful and they can be enlightening, and they can make the relationship not only more fun, but stronger as well. What are your clients' pain points? What don't they like? What do we want to help them avoid? And in many cases, it's as simplistic as fiduciary liability, where we can tell them, well, that's perfect. We have a complete education program called Fiduciary Fitness Program, not only that talks about all the fiduciary responsibilities, how to discharge them, but also how to mitigate the fiduciary liability. It's kind of a quick synopsis of our FFP. Pay attention to the jargon your client uses and mirrors it, or define your concepts using their jargon to reach common understanding. It's important to use terms that your client is familiar with, particularly when we talk about investments, because very few of our clients have investment experts on their committee. And we want to, for lack of a better word, dumb down our presentation a bit to the extent where they can understand what we're trying to communicate with them. And if they use a terminology that is not inappropriate, we want to pick up on that and we want to use it too. Solicit honest feedback often. That's one thing that I've done on a consistent basis. Annually, I would say with all my clients, I would tell them, listen, you may at some point in our relationship get tired of me droning on and might want a different perspective of what we do. And I need to tell you that we've got, several really good seasoned professional investment advisors and pension advisors more specifically that can help you. So if you ever get to the point where you'd like to see a different personality, just let us know. We'd be very happy to make a change for you and you retain our relationship as long as possible. Now, here are clients' people, decision-making influences, and this is important. Sometimes there's a coach, there's a person who brought you in to make a presentation on your services. And that person is an advocate, obviously, of ours. And we want to pay particular attention to the coach because he's the one who may not only have brought us in, but is keeping us on the plan as well. Equally as important is to know the executioners. And the executioners are the people who can fire us. And they might not even be on the committee. So it is important if there's a CFO or a president that is not on the committee, but certainly has the ability to say, hey, let's go out and look for a new advisor, or I've got a friend, or whatever the case may be. So we want to do our best to get in front of those people. It does nothing but enhance our relationship, and maybe take that person to lunch or breakfast or whatever the case may be, or just establish some sort of a personal relationship with anyone in the plan who can fire us, right? We don't want to be sidelined by a person that we should have gotten to know but didn't get to know. And that is one of the mistakes that I have made in my career. Financial buyer. They always want to know how much does it cost, right? It's usually the CFO or finance VP, whatever. And their primary motivation is typically cost, not always. And there's other issues they're interested in, obviously, as well. But cost is important. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then the user buyer, who wants to know how it works. And that might be an administrator who's on the committee. And the administrator can get us fired too. So it's important that we have a relationship with that administrator and that we let them know that we appreciate the work that they do for the plan. They are integral in the plan management. They are the ones that interact with the participants on a regular basis more than anyone else, typically. Not always, but typically. So that individual is important to us. We want to let them know they're important to us. And a question I like to ask them is, how did they decide on how to administer certain provisions of the plan? And typically what they'll say, unfortunately, in my opinion, is that, well, the prior administrator told me how to do it. Well, that's good, but you may want to touch base with the current administrator based on some key issues in the plan document regarding administration of the plan. So you're confident that they're administering it properly, because that's where the vast majority of breaches occur in the administration of the plan, not processing the deposits quickly enough, not being true to the eligibility for whatever reason. So it's good to have a brief review of some of the main provisions of the plan, so we know that that administrator is doing their job well. Sometimes one person can play more than one role. The larger the corporation, typically the greater number of decision makers, and the more likely that each person will have a deeper perspective in one of these areas above, if not multiple areas. Okay, who are the team members as real people? I like to ask the question if they've served for a new plan, if they've served on the committee before, or if a new committee member joins us. What I like to do with that committee member is take them out to breakfast or lunch. And the reason is they're going to be mute for the first 4 or 5 meetings if they have not been on a committee before. They're going to be shy about asking questions because we're throwing around jargon and we're talking about stuff that's ongoing, and they were out of the loop because they just weren't part of the committee for that period of time. So it behooves us to spend some time, even if we don't go out, even if we sit in their office, to bring them up to date on what we're doing with the plan, to talk to them about various provisions of the plan that are important, maybe some prior history of the plan, maybe some ideas that we're looking to implement going forward, and a little bit of conversation about our investment scorecard. So that's not brand new to them, because that's going to be intimidating for most people who are just joining the committee. So I like to give them an overview, bring a sample or theirs if possible, and go through it with them just at a very high level, talk about the scores, talk about how we've come up with the process and what we look for in these funds in terms of performance, and talk to them about the fiduciary issues that we'll be dealing with as we go through the fiduciary fitness program. Learn any personal items, especially when you're in the office of a committee member and you see a picture of his son with a baseball bat in a uniform. That nothing makes them happier than to talk to them about their kids, right? We're all like that. And that's a good way to get to know a committee member on a little bit of a deeper level. And look around at other things, trophies, family pictures, charities they might be involved in, other activities, projects, art that they may have hanging, might be a family member's piece of art. It might be something they really relate to. And it's good fodder for conversation and to deepen the relationship. And that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to deepen the relationship at every opportunity for every individual who has decision-making capacity. And that sounds kind of, too business-like. We're looking for the decision makers. But the reality is we're going to have a good time while we're doing this too. We'll get to know some interesting people. They'll get to know us. And you never know what kind of relationship might be extended as a result of that for the plan and outside of the plan as well. Build a relationship from top and bottom, I should say. Who's the primary decision maker? Who's the day-to-day contact? We already talked about that. And help make them your coach too, so you have multiple coaches. Pay attention to the room, vibe, body language, committee members who look uncomfortable, and help them find a voice. I like to, from time to time, bring another member of our staff into the committee meeting with me, because it's really hard to be presenting particularly investment information and looking for body language and vibe and whatnot of the meeting while you're doing so. So, we can learn a lot from another member of our team that we bring in that tells us after the meeting. We'll ask them, what have you noticed in the committee as I was talking? Were people engaged? Were they not engaged? Were they falling asleep? What's going on? And we can learn from that. So that's another a good aspect of client management that we don't always think about. Incidentally, when I was in client management, I would go through a presentation very similar to this on maybe an every other quarterly basis. And for one reason or another, I'll always come across a point that I neglected in the last 3 or 6 months to do with a client. So it's good to refresh on something like this. Setting the stage for RPAG when we're doing that aspect of getting to know us and them. It's important to talk about one RPAG and what we are and the size, the assets, the number of plans we have across the country, thousands of plans, that we have national coverage. We actually also have international coverage through our relationships. As I mentioned, introduce other resources. And the way I like to handle other resources, sometimes, I'm in a situation with a client where they're highly competent people are not able to contribute as much as they'd like. And one thing that I always will introduce is the ability for alternate sources that high net worth clients or C-suite clients or highly compensated clients can participate in. What I'll do if there is a spark of interest is I'm not going to jump up and say, okay, I'll bring my guy who's in charge of that department to our next meeting. What I'll say is this, because I like soft introductions. If you would like our next meeting, I'll have our expert call in and I'll give him a 10-minute timeline to speak about what we do and how it might relate to you and how it might solve some problems for your highly compensated people. If at the end of the 10 minutes you have questions and you want them on longer, that's perfectly fine. But I don't want it to take up a lot of air in the room. I want you to just be able to make a determination as to whether there is a significant interest in pursuing this issue or not. And if not, that's fine. Then I've done my job. We've explored that and we move on to other issues. Leverage everything RPAG has to offer. Value add to the client, even outside our immediate space, right? Like what I just mentioned. In terms of the industry, it's important to tell them that we are a legitimate innovator in this industry. I mean, RPAG itself is an innovation. We started our life working before RPAG was even named RPAG, and it's been very, very key part of what we do for our entire lifespan. FlexPath, there's another excellent example. I mean, as you know, we had to set up an institutional department so that we can bring FlexPath to institutional clients. CITs, huge amount of CITs that we have available, certainly a lot of them in FlexPath, but available outside as well. And PEP, which is becoming a really interesting opportunity. It's the current version of an MEP, a multiple employer plan. This is a pooled employer plan, which removes the disadvantages of an MEP and allows more entities to join a group to get economies of scale and more attractive investments. So, and much less fiduciary liability. Very, very important program, not just for the smallest clients, because we see clients in the 20, 30, $40 million range that are joining PEPs, mostly because they want to eliminate as much fiduciary liability as they can. Set proper expectations with your client. This is very important. I like to review our services agreement, inclusive of our fees, annually with the client. I put it in every document that I deliver to a client because I always want to say, if they ask a question, every document has our fee schedule in it. I may not focus on it for a particular meeting if we have other topics to talk about, but it's always there. We want you to know our fees. We want you to know our services. And we're very comfortable having that conversation. And I had a situation with a client once where I never got to meet the CEO. It was a significant size company, and they had international exposure as well. And one day the CEO came into the room, who founded the organization, and he was a gruff guy. And I already knew a little bit about his prior advisor. He was a friend of the CEO. And the meeting, the committee people told me that they didn't think they were getting enough service from that individual. He was basically working off of his relationship with the CFO and or CEO. And somehow they got him fired and us hired, which I was very proud to learn. And so we're in this meeting, and he comes in, kind of a gruff guy. He comes in, sits down in the middle of the meeting and says, what are your fees? What are you charging us? I mean, it reminded me like I was back in Manhattan doing business, not a California guy. And he's like, what? Tell me your fees. And I'm like, well, sure. And I told him what our fees were, and I told him they were in every document I deliver. And he says, oh my gosh, that's 2 times what our prior advisor was charging us. And much to my delight, literally all of the committee members, almost in unison, started saying, well, these guys are doing 10 times more for our plan. They're helping us out 10 times more than the prior advisor was. And they're worth every penny of that extra fee. And, what more could you want to hear from your client than something like that? So good idea to review that and to set realistic expectations with your clients, right? And sometimes we feel this intrinsic responsibility to say, I will fix that tomorrow, when we know we're not going to fix it tomorrow. So we need to try to set a realistic expectation there. Say, I'm pretty sure I can get this done by the end of this week. If I can't, I will call you and let you know, and I'll let you know why, and I'll let you know what the expectation should be. And I do that because I don't want to send it in an email. It's kind of a cowardly way to deliver bad news to your client. And they smell that, by the way. We're not getting anything past them. So I want to tell them in person, I wasn't able to meet that commitment. Here's why, but I'm working on it as we speak, and I'll get it to you as soon as I possibly can, or by next Monday, or whatever the case may be. It's very important to repeat what you've heard from a client. I know when I hear a service provider for me do that, it makes me feel more comfortable with that person. It makes me feel like they understand what I'm saying because they reiterated verbatim what I just said. So it behooves us to do the same thing with that client. What I hear you saying is this fund is a little too aggressive as a replacement for the fund that we're removing. So let me go back and find something that's got a little more conservative bent to it. And our next meeting, we'll be able to make a decision about a replacement for this fund. Follow meetings and phone calls with written confirmation of what we're going to be doing. Learn how to say no with a yes. Of course, what we mean by that is not to say no, but to say, I can't get you exactly what you're asking me. It's just not possible to do that, or to do that within a certain time frame. But here's what I can do. And then you commit to that responsibility. That's a much better way to handle something than just saying, we can't do that. I don't know if we can do that. I will look at it and I will get back to you tomorrow. My gut tells me we're not able to do that, but if not, I will find another way we can skin that cat, so to speak. Set timelines for projects, already talked about that. Admit when you're wrong proactively. I'll call the client back and say, at our meeting yesterday, I said I was going to do this. And as I was driving to the office this morning, thinking about our meeting, which is another good thing to say, it occurred to me that I can't do that. But I've got an alternate solution for that. Or that what I told you was not 100% accurate yesterday. Here's the accurate answer. What can I do to correct this for you? Call instead of mailing, I talked about. Solicit honest feedback often. I always do that. Am I giving you what you want in these meetings? Do you want me to focus on another aspect of the plan? Do you want me to go deeper or less deep into the investments? Very important to ask these questions to your client. So, as an overview of our consulting approach, we see this in graphic form here. Meeting retirement plan goals, fiduciary education and protection and guidance, investment due diligence, efficient and effective plan design, service provider management, participant communication and education, and being of value as an advisor and an advocate for you. Services more clearly specified. We can service 321 or 338 advisor. And if your firm allows you to do 338, my personal feeling is 338 is significantly underutilized. And you'll know this. One giveaway is the client will say to you, why are you showing me 3 options for the replacement? I hired you to make that decision. Well, that client doesn't understand the difference between 321 and 338. And maybe 338 is the answer for that client. And the other thing, 338 has other benefits to it. Of course, 338 is when you make the investment decision on behalf of the client. 321 is when you bring some choices that you've scrubbed down and they have to make the final determination. And that becomes very important when they're doing any investment in the plan, because as the DOL gave fiduciary shelter, assuming that their QDIA was chosen on the basis that it's complicit with the needs and goals of the participant demographic, they came back a little later and said, oh, by the way, you should follow that rule with any investment that you bring into the plan, right? So it's very important that that is followed. And if a 338 is appropriate, it gives us a lot more air in the room to talk about other things rather than taking 80% of the time up with investment review. And that's very important, talking about fiduciary education, talking about plan goals, talking about participant behavior, and whatever the case may be. Of course, another service, very, very key, fiduciary fitness. I do a lot of RPAG training, and what frustrates me is I hear often that it's not being used because it's intimidating. It's really not intimidating. There's an easy way to be introduced to fiduciary fitness program, and that is look at Ed modules 1 and 2, and just focus on that for as long as you want to, and bring that to your clients. And then go from there, because most of what is also included are things we do on a day-to-day basis in our management of the plan, and not in need of really specific minutia. but they should all be delivered at one point or another in a relationship. Remediation of compliance gaps. Well, part of that is handled by fiduciary fitness because we bring documentation modules to every education module that we provide. Legislation and regulatory updates, very, very important. Who's getting litigated against? What are the reasons? Are they successful? Are they not successful? What do we learn from that litigation? And of course, regulatory updates are important because it changes the plan in some instances. Review and comment on fiduciary liability. Can't tell you how many times I've asked a client if they have fiduciary liability insurance. They say yes. And this is what I tell them. I tell them, that's great. I'm glad you've had the foresight to do that because it could come in very, very handy, obviously. But if you'd like, I'm happy to review that policy for you just to make sure it's contemporary and it's comprehensive. We don't sell fiduciary insurance, so I have no dog in the hunt there. But I'd be more comfortable if I saw the contract and made sure it was as comprehensive and contemporary. And 9 times out of 10, they would hand me a D&O or an EB&L policy that specifically includes fiduciaries. So I think that's very important to do that. And once you've brought that to their attention, you've done a really good service for them. Assist with indemnification documents for plan fiduciaries. That's remedial. A very simple part of our plan management. They already have indemnification documents for other reasons. Provide online fiduciary briefcase. That's great. Good idea. They don't have to do that, but it's great because if you're ever audited and your administrator is out sick for 2 weeks, you can drag stuff from the briefcase. You don't have to let them go running through a fiduciary file where they might find out something negative that they never would have found out before. Establish and review governance. That's part of fiduciary fitness committee charter. Important. IPS, very, very important. Minutes to all meetings. We do that in our meeting minutes, obviously, very important. ERISA guidance on plan issues. We've got a staff of former practicing ERISA attorneys that are excellent and plugged into DC. Consult a head of mergers and acquisitions. A lot of plans don't let us do that. They don't tell us. They think it's a secret, but they can be getting a tremendous amount of fiduciary liability that they never would have wanted if they don't get us involved in the process of a merger and acquisition. Provide basic training orientation to new committee members we talked about, and review regulatory landscape and potential strategies. So additional services, investment analysis and consulting, plan expenses, monitoring and reduction of plan expenses. Plan expenses is interesting. I've got a few more minutes. I want to close early to answer any questions. But you get into this conversation with clients where they're either, well, should we go fixed dollar or should we go asset charge? And there's no good answer to that question, because if you go fixed dollar, it helps the highly compensated people who have the bigger asset balances, and it hurts the participants with low asset balances. If you go the opposite way, the opposite happens, right? So there's no good answer to that. The only compromise I could throw out to the client is, well, you could do 50-50. You can take your plan expenses and you can, pay for us through corporate dollars, obviously, because the participant isn't involved in that, or other issues like an attorney or whatever. But the plan expenses you can construct to be 50% of them be fixed dollar and 50% of them be asset based. Plan design, very, very important. Employee engagement, we want to monitor that frequently. And client advocacy, let them know that we're their advocate when dealing with any of their service providers, but particularly the record keepers. And we have such a substantial volume of business that I've actually had situations with clients where the client has called me and they told me XYZ administrator big insurance company administrator says, I can't do this and I want to do it. And I'm saying, okay, let me talk to them. I want to get their version of the issue and why they maybe can't do that. And I will get right back to you. So I'll call the record keeper. And more often than not, they tell me, listen, Michael, we don't do this. We have a hard and fast rule not to do this. But since you're RPAG, if you think this is very important for us to do this, for your relationship with this client, we will do it. Now, they're not going to say that every time, but I've had that happen a number of times. And you know what I told them at that point? I told them, no, I respect your hard and fast rule. If I don't have a good reason for you to break that rule, I'm not going to ask you to break that rule. And that goes toward our relationship with the record keeper, because they don't hear that. I guarantee you they don't hear that from other advisors, that they're going to stick up for the record. And I'll go back to the client and say, I know it's not going to break our relationship. Yeah, they cannot do that. They won't do it. If they start doing it, they have to do it for other people. They've never done it before. And I think you'll agree with me that we'll find another way around this issue. Final takeaway. Everyone sells, right? We're selling everything. We sell ourselves at every meeting. It's not a bad thing, particularly because we have something great to sell, our services, and it's valuable. In every client interaction, you're selling yourself and RPAG. This is why we should treat every client with the mindset that we would have a personal relationship or as if it were a first date. Be excited to get to know all about them, exude your excitement, exude your interest and your depth of knowledge and understanding, and ask a lot of questions. If you think somebody's not understanding you, stop the timeline and say, can I explain this a different way? Or do you understand precisely the implication here? And the reason for this is right on the bottom here. Clients do not care what you know until they know that you care. That is the extent of this presentation.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.